Two. Okay. Hi, I'm Patty Barr. I'm the director of iCater, which is the Iowa Center for Assistive Technology Education and Research. We're here at the University of Iowa College of Education. And I'm here today with Kirsten, and we're going to talk about you and about employment and about things that help you. So can you just tell us a little something about yourself and your likes, your dislikes, your aspirations, what you do?
So I'm a teacher, and I'm a Montessori teacher as well. I'm also tutor children with dyslexia and specialize in Orton Gillingham. So a lot of my answers have to do with the kids, a teacher's perspective, and then from my own experiences as a dyslexic. So likes and dislikes. As a learner, I absolutely hate being put on the spot to do calculations with numbers. I think I don't know if it comes from just being put on the spot at the chalkboard as a kid, but yeah, I draw a blank at that point. So it's not that I can't do it, but being put on the spot to do it is
The anxiety.
Yeah, I think that is what I get first, and then get multiplying. I used to absolutely hate going to the meat counter or the cheese counter and having to order in pounds. It took forever to figure that out. But, over time, you put it together. Other dislikes I have, I think it's very difficult sometimes to recall names and find words to describe things. So I will be trying to have a conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden the words will just leave my head, and I can't express what I'm trying to say. So it's frustrating knowing what I want to say and knowing that those words exist and that
they're there in your head.
They're there and they're so poignant, but you can't recall it at the right moment to be really explicit in what you're saying. And that's frustrating. So, saying dumbing down sentences is very derogatory, but in essence, choosing words that are less descriptive is just less communicative and
is
frustrating.
That how about in writing? Is it that way in writing as well?
Absolutely, because you can't, as I try to write things down, you're thinking about your next thought, and then you forget about the word you're trying to write, or you're trying to spell it, and then that completely impedes the whole thing. So yeah, definitely writing is
I sometimes am typing along and I put a word in, or sometimes I just put X's in and just keep going and then come back to it.
Yeah.
Do you ever do anything like that?
I'll leave blanks, or I'll type in just randomly 10 or 15 letters.
Exactly.
Or I can color code it now and you just leave a space for it. Or I type in a word and I'll highlight it and bold it to go back and check the thesaurus later so that I can maybe find the word I'm thinking of. So yeah, there's lots of little tricks, but again, that's another level of thinking, and you have to be quick to do that, to not lose your train of thought. So doing that later in the day is more difficult than it is first thing in the morning. I know that I'm much better in the morning than I am at night. And if I'm very tired, I'll flip words, flip letters, the beginning of words, compound words, you'll flip the compound words back and forth, things like that.
Okay. All right. So you're a teacher and a tutor, specifically for children with dyslexia?
Yeah. Yep. For the exact thing I suffer from. So. But I'm able to understand where they're coming from.
Oh, yeah.
So I see their wheels turning in their brain, and I know exactly what they're trying, often by, looking at their paperwork, I can see exactly what they're trying to decipher. And from there, give them just enough of a boost to get them over that little hump, or provide the answer if that's what's needed in that situation. But that takes time as a teacher to learn when to step in, how much to step in, because kids need to build pathways in order to find the answers themselves. Like it's like paving a road, starting from gravel and building it up to the concrete. And if the pathway is really rough, but it's there, then they need the time to continue to pave it. And if it's not there at all, then you need to start somewhere. Otherwise, they're not going to know what direction to go.
Yeah. Might need some edges on that too.
Yeah.
Is kind of what you're,
Yeah,
what I'm visualizing when you speak.
Yeah, and visualization's a big part of what dyslexics do and how they think. So the more words provide images, the easier it is for memory, for recall, for continued conversation. When things are very abstract or new words that you can't provide a picture for in your own brain, it makes it harder to continue to, connect the thoughts and ideas in the conversation.
Now, I'm going to just bring this up twice in as you've described yourself. You've said that you're a dyslexic.
Yes.
And rather than a person with dyslexia.
Yes.
I've always been taught that we should use first language.
Okay.
Well, do you have any comment on that?
Oh, not really. I think just habit, maybe.
Okay. All right. I've just
habit.
No, and it's fine.
Yeah.
In fact, I was talking with a woman with autism, and she said, I'm autistic. I want to be called autistic.
I don't.
And she actually told me that it was kind of a generational thing. So she was telling me I was old.
Maybe. I don't want to say I have dyslexia, because if you say you have it, that leads to the thought that maybe you could get rid of it. And so
that's exactly how she described it.
And so it isn't. If you don't own it, if it doesn't become part of who you are, then it's not something. There are positive sides to dyslexia. So if we can embrace the positive side, then we don't always have to focus on the negative. And that allow you, I teach the kids to own it. If they don't own it and they don't say, I am a dyslexic and this is what I need to do well, and I have the right to have these accommodations and these services to be successful as, an employee or as a student, then they're not going to walk up to their teachers as 18-year-old college students and say, I have the right to these things, because they didn't learn it as a child. So it starts with very little things like language. And I think that's part of why I do it that way. But
just kind of
a good question.
Kind of aside.
Yeah.
So what kind of, when you were growing up, maybe, and also today, and then also other children that you work with, what kind of aspirations did you have as a child? Do you have today? And what kind of aspirations do the children that you're working with?
So as a student, as a kid growing up, my aspiration was just to pass and to get out of school. So that meant overcoming a lot of things. So an aspiration would be, I wouldn't want that to happen to my own children. Certainly not my students either.
And I know you're doing a great job with that, because I've met some of your students, and they and even your children, and they're great. They're really they're owning their dyslexia, and they're reaching high, which is maybe why you're so passionate about it. Because it was so
for
difficult
aspirations,
for you.
that would probably have to be the number one. Just to have awareness out there so that kids don't suffer. It isn't necessary. And there's so many things that school districts, teachers, principals, they don't know, not to their own fault, but maybe because of the way we're taught in school as teachers, in our education system, that dyslexia isn't discussed, even if you're going into special education. It's a very small chunk of your education. So teachers come into meetings with parents, even if they're 5 years into their career, and they have to sit down and say, well, your child's not reading. And let's say, use an example as a boy, and they say, he's just a boy. He's, they're late bloomers. And that's just not acceptable. It's not true. It's not a reason. And it placates parents, and they think we're the professionals as the educators. So they listen to us, and that puts more pressure on a teacher to know the answer, but they really don't. And yet they're going back to their classrooms thinking, I really don't know how to help this child. And they're at a loss too. So,
but you're helping these children. What kind of things are you doing to help these children? And what helped you? What helps you?
Well, so when I went through my education, my master's degree to become a teacher, it was all whole language based. And we had a big conversation. Should we be teaching kids whole language, or should we be teaching phonics? Well, we had just finished an entire master's degree in whole language. Why would you not defend that? And then as I started to teach in the classroom, I realized I have a huge hole, and I don't understand how to fill it. I don't know how to help these kids be better readers, to be more effective readers, to be better with language. And so I searched programs, and I kept trying to buy programs, because at this point in time I was at the Montessori school and I was in charge of all the curriculum. And I purchased things, I spent money, and some things worked, some things didn't. I went the Montessori route, I went more traditional routes. I tried to incorporate all kinds of things into the classroom. And in the end, I did come up with a little bit of something that was definitely way more than whole language. Phonics in Montessori is all based on Norton Gillingham originally, so I at least had that to start with. But eventually, after leaving the classroom, I found, the true Orton Gillingham program, and that's what I'm teaching. So it's kind of funny that I've narrowed down so much to the quintessential part of what I struggled with as a kid. And
Is
I've
there
been
special
searching all these
training
years.
for Orton Gillingham?
So there's special training. So to answer your question more completely, I had to find my own way as a teacher and I had to spend my own money to be trained in it. So colleges aren't teaching this. They're usually programs outside of the colleges, which are, you pay extra for that. And then you get certified on top of that. So it's not part of a college degree. Yeah. So yeah, I had to definitely search it out on my own and figure it out on my own.
So that's what you're teaching the students that you tutor.
Precisely.
That's the curriculum
So I use the Multisensory Institute that specializes in Norton Gillingham, and they have, this company has tried to take the heart of Orton Gillingham and teach teachers how to use it in a classroom setting. Wow, so originally, Orton Gillingham had designed the program to be used one-on-one, teacher-student, and explicit instruction, which is very hard to do. And some children, that's what they need to be successful. However, there's such a broad amount of kids in a classroom with various learning abilities that if you can teach enough of a phonics-based program to a classroom of kids, you won't have these gaps that kids fall through that are intelligent, and maybe they need just a little bit. Maybe they're not profoundly dyslexic, they're just a little bit dyslexic, and just enough phonics is enough to get them over the hump to be successful. And I think that's what IMSE is trying to do with their programming, to fill some of those gaps for schools and teachers.
IMSE?
IMSE, Institute of Multisensory Education.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure our listeners knew what that was.
Yeah, you can look it up online.
Okay. All right. Well, you've been talking about the Orton Gillingham. Is there any assistive technology or anything that you found that you use, or any that your students use?
My daughter definitely loves the C pen because she uses it to highlight words and vocabulary for her lit classes. She really,
And that's fairly new.
and that's fairly new. It's very, she was very panicked when she thought she lost it. She uses Co-Writer by Don Johnson. That is a godsend for her in her writing class. And well, for anything, she uses it for everything.
So does she use the word prediction feature? How about the voice input feature?
She doesn't use that as much.
Okay.
Although I think that's very beneficial. I really like that part of the program, and I've recommended it to many of my students. But I've learned that dyslexic kids have lots of different likes and dislikes.
Absolutely.
If they don't try out the tech, whether it's dyslexic, like I love Dyslexia, the font, the change in font. I read much faster with it.
Really?
I do.
That's great.
It's amazing. But I know a dyslexic student of mine who is more dyslexic and can't stand dyslexia. So it just depends on the learner and what works for them. Some kids love the smart pen where they can draw pictures rather than write words and take notes in class and record what the teachers are saying. Other kids are fine with just writing, or they'll audio tape and they won't write anything at all. My son takes pictures of everything. That's how he stays organized. So the camera on the telephone is a huge asset to him.
Wow, we might have to talk about Evernote or something.
Evernote, yes. And I have to laugh because I've been telling him about, what's the other one?
Notability.
Notability. I've been telling them about Notability for years. And he comes home and one of his friends said, you should try this program out. He came home to tell me about Notability. I'm like, yeah, that's been on my iPad for about 4 years, hon.
Did you say, wow, what a wonderful idea?
Yeah, it was lovely. I have nothing but support. My older son, the oldest is 22. He uses Evernote. Yeah, that works for him. So he's able to connect all of his work schedule with his class schedules and his tests, and he does all of his contacts all go through Evernote. So he really likes the cut and paste of anything he can find on the internet and just tacks it all up there.
So that it's organization is kind of a need as well.
Absolutely, organization, and again, I think that depends on the learner. You know, when I was going through school, sticky notes were a thing, and color coding everything was a huge help to me. Separating things.
I still love to color code.
Yeah. I mean, I separate things on paper, put things in boxes, circle things, and then I remember images. And so, but if I don't color code, if I don't put shapes around the things, then I can't recall it as well. That was before there was tech. So I think a lot of the kids in this generation, a lot of my students and my children, they're using tech to fill those gaps. Whereas, you know, so it's different. It's different for them. You know, definitely taking a picture helps in a way that I couldn't take a picture. So organization is an issue.
Color coding with highlighting and
highlighting, pencils, sticky notes, color coding with sticky notes, the sizes of the sticky notes, having lines on sticky notes as opposed to just, you know, a blank piece of paper. That all makes a difference. So there's I would use certain sizes of sticky notes to reference different things. So from the little ones to the big fat ones. Yeah. And then I created little sayings. Like VP always meant very important because those were the 2 syllables or sounds that I heard most often. So if something was really important, I would just put VP next to everything. So just little tricks like that meant something to me that anybody else looking at my paper would have no clue what it meant. But, you know, yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Any other technology or techniques that are used by you, your children, your students?
Bells and alarms and ringing constantly to catch school buses on time, to, you know, remember to leave the house on time for swim practice or whatever it is. So a lot of alarms. I do the same thing with notes. I get reminders through the phone. I use everything through one calendar. Don't use multiple different ways to organize. Use only one thing. Other tech. I mean, like there's Co-Writer, a lot of the software that we've mentioned, I think would be.
Do any of your students use voice input, like Drag and Dictate or anything like that?
Well, they're pretty young still, and they're not at that point. I do know some. I anticipate a couple who will use Drag and Dictation and find that more accessible than even a word prediction typing program. But they're just not at that age where there's a lot of writing yet. So they're not depending on that. Although I personally depend on it. I do speech to text on emails and on text messages.
Yeah, I just showed it to my husband on his phone, and he got up in the middle of the night and used it to get a note down before he could go back to sleep.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I know my husband, who has no disability in learning at all, wants Drag and Dictation for his office just to speed up the process, because he can speak faster than he can type, and the idea is
Most
just
of us
still,
can.
So he would like to make use of Dragon just for that purpose.
Well, I've heard of people using Dragon with students as young as 3rd grade.
Okay.
And I've personally used it with a student as young as 4th grade. So it's not always too early.
Yeah, well, I will have to bring him in and have him talk to you and get him to practice on some of it more than just on Chrome, and see if it's something that he would benefit from.
Yeah, the voice input on Chrome is really good these days too. It's really great,
and it's easier to access.
Yes,
it's not as hidden as it used to be.
And because it's there, it's going to be available to everyone, and it's going to take some of that stigma away, I think, that using these special tools.
Right. So when you talk about blind disabilities, which dyslexia is a blind disability,
or hidden
disability, you have, if people are accessing the same tools that dyslexics would use, then they understand. I think there could be more understanding, more sympathy, more compassion for, this is just an accommodation. It's just a tool to help you do something a little bit more.
Another kind of pencil. That's a different pencil.
Yeah, more accurate, or just quicker. And so it could be positive and negative. It could help you hide it more, which isn't good or bad, but it isn't putting it out there for the world to see that it's not a bad thing, and that dyslexics do have incredible strengths because they're able to use both hemispheres of the brain to do things that non-dyslexics can't access. And that puts them into the workforce at a different level to do things more creatively.
Okay, I was waiting for the word creative. I went to a presentation. I don't know where it was, but the man that was speaking was saying, I'm dyslexic, but I'm creative. That's what it gives me. That's what kind of the give and take of dyslexia.
The EDs from Dyslexic Advantage have broken down the strengths of dyslexia into 4 major categories that spell the word mind, M-I-N-D. And I don't always remember all 4, but I know the I is for interconnectedness, and one is for, N is for narration, because dyslexics see things in pictures, so they can narrate things and dictate things very vividly, which makes them very good writers, because the idea of being a good writer is to make the audience picture exactly what the author is trying to say. So the other is being able to turn images in the brain into a 3D perspectives. So engineers or construction or automotive. You take a motor and put it in your brain and turn it around all four sides, five sides. You can see different things that non-dyslexic doesn't have the ability, because that takes both hemispheres of the brain to do. So
that's great. Yeah. How fun. Whew. Maybe not fun. Maybe that wasn't the right word.
But everybody has different strengths, right? So just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean you have all four strengths, and you might have them in varying degrees. But you could have one to an extreme degree.
Do you think M is memory?
Oh my gosh, I just don't know. Probably not. It's not dysnomic. So.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like, with the creativity and the vivid descriptions, sounds like there would be great careers for people who are dyslexic, and that there would be strengths even in hiring people with dyslexia.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to come at that question. One is, does the dyslexic person know what their strengths are, and have they been able to discover them and bring them to the forefront and use them to their advantage and to their true potential? If that's the case, then absolutely they can go into a field, choose a field that is, lends themselves to use their strengths. I also know that there are companies out there that have realized that dyslexia has advantages that are things that company is looking for. So they will look for dyslexic people who, and then this comes back to embracing dyslexia. If you can't embrace it as a person, then if someone's out there looking for dyslexic, you can't raise your hand and say, hey, that's me. So again, it comes back to, are we teaching our kids what dyslexia is, and that it's okay to say it, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to use accommodations, and it's okay to speak up for yourself. We need to do that as a society for all people with disabilities, so that we can tap into what their strengths are and let the communities, reap the benefits of their potential,
their strengths,
and their absolutely,
their creativity. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Anything else that you wanted to? We kind of got off track with some of our questions that we were going to talk about, and I know you've got a few notes in front of you.
Yeah.
Are there other things you wanted to tell us about?
If you want to talk a little bit about what makes a dyslexic a great employee, dyslexics have the ability to access those four different categories. But thinking outside the box, as cliche as that might sound, they do have the ability to connect things and relate things to one another in a way that's complex and gives them an advantage in a work environment. I think understanding disabilities, understanding how it can affect a job, and being able to put in supports helps everybody in the business. So
what kind of supports might an employer or a teacher or like someone in a classroom in a school?
In the situation I was in, I wrote a lot of notes to parents. So for me, always needing a proofreader. Back then, there weren't things like Grammarly available, so I rely on that heavily now. But I always ask the secretary at the time to double check things for me. I think always having somebody proofread before it goes out, not just for, the logistics of the note, but proofreading. But I think that also helps a lot. More time, I think. And
I hear that over and over.
Time to think, time to organize, time to process. Even in meetings, you can have great ideas and want to say something, but if everybody is just speaking out into, into the room, it's very hard to tack on and have conversation. I often recall myself saying, can we go back, 2 or 3 comments and make a comment and then see how that changes the conversation again. And so time to respond. And I also think more time to prepare as a teacher in the classroom. I organized it differently than, everything wasn't alphabetical or numerical. I had my own way of organizing things. So I just needed the space and the time to do that.
Okay. Other things for employers?
I think awareness would be the one place to start. And then after that, there has to be a place to go. Being aware that somebody's struggling or that they need help is just the starting point. They then need to know where to go and what to do and what to offer, and probably funds available. If it means purchasing some software or some tech to help out, then that needs to be there. Because
it's not like this stuff is really expensive.
No, or difficult to get your hands on. Sometimes it's just a trip down the road to the store,
or just to the
Chrome
browser,
right?
Chrome
just
web
to the
store.
computer,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody who knows how to use and access those things on the computer who can show them. A lot of times people don't even know it's available.
Yeah.
So it's
We want to. RAGBRAI is coming through Iowa City this summer, and so Mary and I are going to show people how to use text-to-speech and speech-to-text on their iPhones.
As the writers come through.
If they come to the College of Ed, that's what we want to do.
That's awesome.
It's right there. It's available to everyone.
Yeah, that's wonderful. They'll have a huge amount of people.
I hope so. Yeah. And maybe they'll get up in the middle of the night and
be bored.
Speak a message into their phone and capture that thought, and then they can go back to sleep.
That's
like
right.
My husband did.
That's right. That's really great. Writers will love that.
I hope so. Yeah. Are there other things you wanted to tell us?
Oh, I can't think of anything. I think we've covered a lot.
Okay, we have.
Mary,
you talked about the need for awareness for teachers and employers.
Yeah.
Could you say some common signs or maybe things that you have done or seen kids do that people could see and then try to help?
So, I think for employers, those signs in an adult are very different than what they are in children. So especially if you're in a work environment as opposed to a teaching environment where you're teaching kids how to read, I'm going to see different things that an employer is going to see. So I obviously struggle with writing, taking a long time to write. Searching for words is another one. Of course, these are specific to dyslexia, but I think maybe the best thing to do is just ask the person. And depending on their age or awareness, they may not even know that they are suffering from something like dyslexia. So it could be difficult to approach, but as a valued employee, they could say, I think we have something going on here that we can solve the problem if we can identify it. And if it is something like dyslexia, we just give you a different computer or, provide somebody or drag it to dictate. So
how about text to speech? You mentioned your daughter uses the pen for text to speech.
Yeah, she uses that for, so the C pen she's using in math for word problems, and she uses it for the dictionary in words that she's trying to do on a vocabulary test.
Great vocabulary builder.
It is, and she has a good vocabulary. That's one of the strengths of dyslexics, is to have a high vocabulary. Learning Ally is huge, and watching words be highlighted on the iPad or on the tech while they're listening.
You think that really helps?
That helps. But more than anything, I was very surprised at how listening to books over time helped her listen to her teachers give lectures in school.
Ooh,
and I
helped her
didn't
listening skills.
her listening skills, which I was very surprised. I thought that, with the amount of delay, there's often delay, short-term memory, that she would miss a lot of information. And I realized that listening and being a very proficient listener was an enormous help in listening to her teachers. So it's just a perfected skill that by doing it before the junior high years gave her an enormous boost, and she's got really good grades from that. So
Great.
Yeah, it definitely filled gaps.
Good. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Patty.
And I just, you've shared such rich information that I just really appreciate you being here. So thank you.
I'm glad I could.
Okay.